In a recent video, we said that human rights were a new concept. What is the history of human rights? What are they? Where do they come from? The struggle of human rights. Welcome to Into the Desert, exploring the wilderness of ideas. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. And if you want to support this channel and our mission of encouraging discussion and not division, please join us on Patreon. The link is in the description.
Human rights is a source of great confusion. As we said in a recent video, it's only in the 17th century that we began to get a concept of human rights. Before that, the only rights anyone ever spoke of was the divine right of kings. It was the right of the king to rule. But in the 17th century, people began to look at that more in depth, and you began to get a foundation from God that human rights were more important than the right of kings to rule. And the concept was that whatever God had given you, nobody had the right to take that away, not even the king. And so from that emerged the concept of human rights. You had people like John Locke writing in the 17th century about God-given rights that superseded the right of the king to rule. These included for Locke things like life, health, liberty, and possessions. And that was sort of the beginning foundations of this concept we call human rights. By the time you get to the 18th century, and in particular 1776, you have Thomas Jefferson creating the document, what we call the Declaration of Independence, and he drew from John Locke when he said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Notice that Jefferson changed property to pursuit of happiness with lots of implications for the future. That became the foundations of the American government. And you see that going all the way through Martin Luther King when he gave his speech on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. He said that the Declaration of Independence was a promissory note. It had not been fulfilled, but those rights were still there, and he was claiming, I think correctly so, that those rights should be expanded to blacks. And so that was an ongoing process. We sort of take rights for granted today, but it really is something that developed over several hundred years and is still developing.
Yeah. Where does that leave us today? It seems like we've been working on this for, let's see, 16, 70, 400 years now. And yet it's still talked about. It's still relevant. It's still on the top of the news dockets every single year to talk about human rights and how we don't have human rights or how we have the wrong human rights.
Well, one of the biggest questions is human rights was originally founded on belief in God, that God had created us with certain gifts, and what God had given us, no one could take away. Okay, great. But what does that mean if you don't believe in God? What if you have an atheistic country like some of the communist countries don't, believe in God, they don't recognize God? If you don't get it from God, then where do you get it? And there's basically three places to get rights. You can get them from nature, you can get them from government, or you can get them from religion, i.e., God or some other religious foundation.
Yeah. And if we really look at those three places, so you said nature, government, and religion. So religion is obviously where our founding fathers said that these human rights come from. But if we look at government, government is supposed to protect human rights. So how can they grant something if they're in charge of protecting it? It seems like a contradiction. And then you get into things like the apartheid in South Africa, and where the government says, human rights is this segregation thing, or, the Nazis of Germany, where human rights have to deal with the Aryan nation and keeping that safe, which kind of leads back into nature, which is eugenics, which we've had a couple of videos talk about the
Yes.
horrors that this natural selection has brought through when it comes to humanity and human rights. So, what other options do we have?
Yeah, it's really hard to get a concept of human rights out of survival of the fittest. Um, that just doesn't seem to go very well. So, which leads
No,
you
what
back to
else is
God.
there in nature other than the survival of the fittest?
Yeah, well, this is why, I mean, some people try to derive it from communal structures and stuff, but that, even if you have one from communal structures, why should our community respect the rights of other communities? I mean, there's just, it becomes very fluid, which is why there's a great deal of controversy over the origin of human rights today, and people are struggling to come up with other basis beyond God. Another controversy is one raised by President Obama when he was talking about the Bill of Rights. He was critical that the Bill of Rights only contained what he called negative rights, things that government was limited to, things government could not do.
That generally the Constitution is a charter of negative liberties, says what the states can't do to you, says what the federal government can't do to you, but it doesn't say what the federal government or the state government must do on your behalf.
And he's absolutely right. The Bill of Rights are negative rights.
Yeah, but he argued that there should be positive rights, rights that government is required to do. And there's an inherent problem because negative rights don't impinge on anybody else. You can have a right to free speech, and I have no obligation to listen.
Yeah.
But
positive rights require people to do something, right? Positive rights like healthcare, the right to healthcare. We hear that all the time. Right? We have an innate right to healthcare. Well, why? Why am I responsible for somebody's bad habits, right? And I'm not talking things that, you have no control over, but let's talk about things that people do have a control over, right? You have a control of whether or not you want to start smoking. So I'm supposed to pay for chronic illnesses of someone who has chosen to smoke for 20, 50 years, right? Now, yes, we can talk about, well, once you start smoking, you have trouble with it. I mean, there's all of these arguments that go around it. But again, why am I paying for somebody else's bad habits? Why am I paying for the mistakes of others?
And even if you assume only pure intentions and pure behavior, why should I be obligated to work for you? If I'm giving it freely, that's charity and that's choice. But if the government's going to come in and mandate that I have to work for you, isn't that some sort of indentured servitude? How does that work out?
Yeah.
And then you go on to, this is, by the way, this is one of the reasons Madison opposed a Bill of Rights. He argued that any Bill of Rights would be incomplete, that the Constitution already gave all the rights to the people and gave government a very limited set of things it could do, and that even if you put down a nice list of rights, how does that apply to rights that you forget to put in? And then why should government respect them anyway? I mean, after all, the Soviet Union had a wonderful Bill of Rights, and it just completely ignored it. So, yeah.
Well, and you can go into group rights versus individual rights, which I think kind of leads into this negative positive. I think it just all kind of follows through that same rabbit hole. And you get into things like China, right?
Yeah.
Now, I don't quite remember everything that happened in Tiananmen Square, but, you could probably explain more of what was going on. But
they had a pro-democracy movement of some sorts, and they assembled in Tiananmen Square, and the Chinese government came in and brutally suppressed it. China argued that they had a group right to develop, and that superseded the individual rights, and therefore anybody who actually complained about them suppressing the protesters in Tiananmen Square were actually violating the rights of China, and therefore ought to be sanctioned by the United Nations for not supporting China's view of group rights. So yeah, this whole thing gets very, very convoluted.
Well, then you get into this argument. I mean, the trolley problem, right? You've got the train going down the track, and you can either not do anything and kill a person, or do something and kill 5 people, or however you want to set it up. But one of the ways of phrasing that is you now have a doctor, right? And he can kill a patient in order to save 5 patients. But are Hippocratic Oath says that you do no harm. So that's never really an issue that a doctor should be facing because it goes against the Hippocratic Oath. But when you're talking about group rights, doesn't that suddenly open up the doorway for a doctor choosing to kill a person to save 5 people? Let's take it to an extreme, right? So does the doctor have a right to kill an evil criminal in order to save 5 innocent children? Do I want to be in charge of making that determination of whose rights are more important?
Well, the trolley problem is a trolley problem because it has no easy answer.
Let us know what you think in the comments. Where do you think human rights come from? What about negative versus positive rights, or group and individual rights? What should the government role be for human rights? If you've made it this far in the video, please consider watching one of these other videos that we're suggesting to you. And if you want to support our channel, please join us on Patreon. Thank you for watching Into the Desert, exploring the wilderness of ideas.